I'm not now. I do think though that there is an interesting dynamic when it comes to like U.S. government and the U.S. security state and their fear mongering over China versus capitalist interests in the U.S. that see business ties in China and don't engage in as much sort of fear mongering rhetoric when it comes. Um, you won't hear the heads of major companies talk about the Communist Party of China like you hear a lot of members of the U.S. government discuss it. So, yeah, it's hard to say what really was motivating NBC's decision there. I mean, when it comes to China, like I, it's it's an interesting, like, it's not a communist state. But
I know.
it is a state that is engaged in central planning. It is looking at things in the long term. It is not letting uh, profit accumulation and capitalists dictate what is going to happen in their economy. Yes, they do have influence, and yes, there's a lot of foreign investment flowing into China every year. Um, what should leftists, anti-capitalists, socialists in the U.S. think of China? It's a complicated question. I don't really have that answer. Um, I don't think that uh, you know I made a tweet that kind of was a little bit controversial with some people a few days ago that said, like, no matter what standard you choose, the US should be considered a more controversial host of the Olympics than China. I
Thank
mean,
you.
even if you want to take the allegations that China is um, does have internment camps, um, that 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 they're detaining Uyghurs in, that's awful. That's a human rights abuse. It should be condemned. The US has a higher prison population than any other country in the world. What ICE is doing on the southern border is a moral travesty. When it comes, people point to Chinese surveillance. I mean, how we know about the Snowden revelations from 8 years ago. We know about the US surveillance state. I don't think China is involved in many imperial wars around the world that the US is involved in. The US is engaged in starving millions of people in Afghanistan by withholding financial assistance. So, like, I'm not sure. I have trouble getting worked up about Chinese human rights abuses and the Chinese menace when I live here in the United States that's committing more human rights abuses both within our borders and outside our borders than any country that's ever existed,
Ever.
really.
Yeah. It's funny because one of the things that bothers me infinitely more about any sort of human rights abuses from China is the human rights violations of our companies that set up in China so that they can commit those human rights violations and like slaves and the such that. So it's like, okay, we can criticize them, but we have no problem letting our, oligarchs make all their money from over there. Like, it's just, the hypocrisy is suffocating. That's how it feels to me. And I generally, when somebody would say negative things about China or Russia or anywhere that we have a problem with, Venezuela, Iran, anywhere, to me, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, they just don't want to play with us, and so we don't like them.
Hence why you've got China and Russia now formulating an agreement on that pipeline for the next, I guess, 30 years.
They don't want to play in our sandbox, and I don't blame them. And so once people decide, I think a lot of it has to do with the petrodollar. And them like having everybody on our currency. Everybody has to be beholden to us somehow. And I think when countries don't want to play ball, then then they're our problem, and we have to have regime change.
Yeah, the way I look at this is, less about individual countries and more about the enemy is global capital. The enemy are these transnational capitalists who are looking for new markets to exploit cheap labor to accumulate more profit. And there aren't many governments around the world that have really taken on this force and looked out for their own citizens. I mean, Cuba, there really aren't that many. at times, you know, I mean, the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Current day Russia doesn't even come close to trying to really do much about global capital. There are steps that China takes, but as you said, you know, China allows a lot of foreign investment in the country and a lot of its workers to be exploited by Western capitalists. So it's, you know, there are no good guys here, right? There are no good
Right.
guys here, and that's why you know, when the U.S. tries to paint Russia or China as bad guys, that's mostly a distraction to me. That's,
Yeah.
you know,
There
it's
are
hard.
no good guys. There
Yeah,
are no good guys.
it's hard to get really jazzed up about going to war with Russia. I mean, how does that benefit the U.S. working class in any way whatsoever? It doesn't.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.